Welcome, and thank you all so much for joining us this morning. I'm Melissa Landry with Louisiana Lawsuit Abuse Watch. With thousands of supporters all across the state, Law works to raise awareness about lawsuit abuse and the impact that it has in our lives. One of the most significant impacts of lawsuit abuse is that it stifles job creation and economic growth. That's the core of the message that we're bringing to lawmakers here today. Louisiana needs more jobs and not lawsuits. At a time when our state is suffering with a weak economy and a huge deficit, our neighbors in Texas are putting people to work. And there's mounting evidence which suggests that economic opportunities in Texas are much easier to come by because employers there spend less time in court fighting frivolous lawsuits and more time creating jobs. That's a trend we need to bring right here to Louisiana. In a few moments, we'll be hearing more about the different approach that Texas has taken to fighting lawsuit abuse. But before we do, I want you to know the results of the reform efforts are absolutely undeniable. It's estimated that Texas has created 500,000 new well-paying jobs as a direct result of the legal reforms they've implemented to bring fairness and balance back to their courts. Meanwhile, it's estimated that Louisiana's poor legal climate has cost our state more than 50,000 new jobs every single year. Now, I know that Texas and Louisiana are both great states with very different cultures, but that doesn't mean we can't learn a lot from each other, especially when it comes to fighting lawsuit abuse and creating more good, well-paying jobs for our state. Here in Louisiana, abusive lawsuits and the abuse of our courts continue to be a key driver of the problems plaguing our economy. When someone is truly harmed, they deserve to seek justice in our courts. But frivolous lawsuits can make that more difficult. They can also put employers out of business and contribute to the rising costs of the things that we need the most, like healthcare and auto insurance. As many of you know, Louisiana has become the subject of increasing national focus as a state with an unfair legal climate. And a national survey sponsored by the U.S. Chamber's Institute for Legal Reform, Louisiana consistently ranked as having one of the least fair and reasonable court systems in the United States. Louisiana ranks poorly in every category, from damage awards to venue requirements and judicial impartiality. New Orleans was also specifically noted as one of the top 10 worst local jurisdictions in the country. Meanwhile, the Manhattan Institute's Center for Legal Policy has labeled our state as a magnet for mass tort lawyers, and the American Tort Reform Association has called out our state on its judicial hellholes watch list. This jarring reputation should concern every policymaker and citizen in Louisiana hoping to see more jobs and a stronger economy. We've been called out on the national stage numerous times for our poor legal climate, and whether we like it or not, reputations matter. The perception of the state's legal climate affects how companies do business and where they decide to invest and create new well-paying jobs. But we know that this is not just a perception problem. We know that litigation is a growing industry here. The numbers demonstrate that. Over the last 5 years, civil litigation has increased more than 26% in Louisiana. We also have the highest number of lawyers per citizen in the region, with 18,000 attorneys now living and practicing in our state. Louisiana has one lawyer for every 256 residents. That's outrageous. And with more lawyers comes more litigation. That's why we have the second highest number of civil suits per person in the region. As I said before, litigation is a growing industry here in Louisiana, but it is not the kind of industry that we need to grow. This excessive litigation is costing us jobs and lost economic opportunities. At a time when our state is already struggling to put people back to work, these are costs we simply cannot afford. That's why we must embrace legal reform and pass new laws that will help to create more jobs and not lawsuits here in Louisiana. That's what they've done in Texas, and that's what we can do here at home. To tell you more about this, I'm excited to introduce you to Sarah Trollinger. As Executive Director of the Rio Grande Valley Citizens Against Lawsuit Abuse, Sarah is part of a massive citizen-led effort that has resulted in significant improvements to Texas's civil justice system. Sarah?
Thank you, Melissa. I'm happy to be here and excited to tell you our success story. Back in the late 80s and early 90s, the Rio Grande Valley of Texas was a hotbed for frivolous lawsuits. Citizens, local employers, civic leaders, and doctors watched as frivolous lawsuits and outlandish damage awards took away job opportunities, raised consumer prices, and limited access to health care. But we were not alone in the Valley. Things eventually got so bad across the state that the Wall Street Journal once famously described Texas as the lawsuit capital of the world. In the late 90s, local citizens decided to fight back. And together, as the nation's first Citizens Against Lawsuit Abuse, or CALEP group, was formed. For years, we've worked to raise awareness about frivolous lawsuits with the goal of bringing fairness and common sense back to our legal system. And I'm proud to say we've been able to do just that. Over the past 2 decades, we've worked with citizens and lawmakers across Texas to make lawsuit reform a top priority. Working together to put payrolls before payouts, we've enacted common sense laws to rein in excessive damage awards and prevent court shopping. We've put a stop to out-of-state lawsuits that had nothing to do with Texas. And under loser pays legislation that passed last year, people who file lawsuits in Texas will be forced to consider the practicality of their complaints before taking legal action, because they now face the threat of paying for the other party's legal fees if the plaintiff's case is found to be groundless. Because of these and many other legal reforms, the Texas civil justice system has become a national model for legal reform, and the Lone Star State has become a jobs machine. A study by the Perryman Group found that legal reforms have strengthened Texas's economy and created jobs, with approximately 8.5% of Texas's economic growth since 1995, resulting from lawsuit reforms. That means that legal reforms account for nearly 500,000 new Texas jobs. And while many states, including Louisiana, are suffering with weak economies and huge deficits in the wake of the national recession, Texas is currently one of the top job producers in the nation. According to Richard Fisher, president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas, 4 out of every 10 new jobs created in the U.S. in a recent period are in the Lone Star State. That's a massive share of America's job growth when you consider that Texas only accounts for about 8% of the nation's economy. What's even more impressive is data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics that shows Texas has added 732,000 private sector jobs over the past 10 years. That's 7 times more than any other state. And for the 8th year in a row, Texas was ranked by CEO Magazine as the best state in the nation for business. While the nation is struggling to put nearly 12 million people back to work, Texas is thriving. Unemployment is down, new job creation is up, and businesses are open. This is a model from which Louisiana could learn a lot. I urge Louisiana lawmakers to take a close look at the many reforms we've passed in Texas, and to consider bringing the reforms and the jobs that the reforms can generate to Louisiana.